What is color?
ArtStation trending or
ArtStation trending. It all looks the same.
Apart from the mantis shrimp, perhaps.
The future is bright when people go to karaoke bar.
It's an unusual experience. Am I expected to fall?
It wasn't your fault.
This is CG Talks, the podcast where CG guys talk about CG.
This podcast is powered by GarageFarm.net, a place where 3D cloud rendering is incredibly fast and cheap.
Hello again. Welcome to CG Talks, the podcast where CG guys talk about CG, which is of course computer graphics. My name is DJ, I'm your host, and today with me I have the CreativeShrimp.com team, Gleb Alexandrov and Aidy Burrows. And we are continuing our conversation on different topics regarding computer graphics and specifically Blender. And I would like to talk a little bit about the Blender itself and its community. We had an opportunity to meet at this year's Blender conference, which was the first one after a few years of online hiatus because of the pandemic. But it wasn't your first one. But this time you weren't giving a talk.
Yeah, I thought you would say it wasn't your fault. It wasn't. Yeah, it was so good to see everyone after all these years, the familiar faces and not so familiar faces, new people as well, many new people.
Yeah, I was the first time there.
And every new day, there were new people coming. It was quite fascinating in that sense.
That's from the conference is pretty wild. It's so big now because you have to just accept you're not going to get to see everybody you want to see or even know or want to see or just it's very it's an unusual experience. It used to be I felt like a large group of friends getting together, but now it's just it is an event. You know what I mean? It is. There are several things going on at once. It's completely accepted. You're not going to be able to do everything. It's impossible. You can't be in all the different talks at the same time. You can't be in all the different community groups. There's different kind of functions happening, sporadic and just off the cuff things happening, like going off to karaoke bars, multiple. And it just depends.
That's the part of the fun, I guess.
Yeah.
And I've even heard
bar specifically.
I've even heard.
My only regret, my biggest regret in life, is that I always miss when people go to karaoke bar, and I know that Daniel Bisted sings, and he sings quite well. And this time they were singing the song from Frozen or something like that, and I totally missed that. I will regret it for the rest of my life.
that are the things that are not streamed or recorded anywhere. So
and then and they also got this song from Armageddon.
Yes,
you can tell that it's very disappointing.
You don't want to miss a thing
for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and you don't really want to miss that thing. Yeah, I even heard Francesco Cidi talking about this live on the podcast with Pablo Vasquez, I think, when he told about this thing, like the simultaneous things happening at the conference. Like it's a deliberate choice of the organizer to make the event smooth, so that there are so many people and they can still feel kind of cozy, and then so that the conference doesn't feel like just a big huge event for so many people at the same time. It's like it's a little bit compartmentalized so that it keeps this this one-to-one vibe or like small community vibe, despite
it was smoother.
Growing.
It was.
The main actor was like the staircase, the round staircase that everyone just like bumped on each other.
Yeah, it's like they included the vertical design into their level design this time, and you had to just constantly crawl the staircase like up and down. That was fun.
They had netting.
You always meet new people at the staircase, and all the business chat happens there. So yeah, that's a good place to be.
Yeah, I never used to be afraid of heights. Those sorts of things. When you look down, you see the netting. something in the back of my mind always goes, am I expected to fall? So
If you do,
Mm.
there is a
Yeah,
plan B.
one of the
Yeah.
presentations at the conference done by Mitch de Mantissa
yeah.
included the staircase as the hero. Like he scanned it
Really?
with his
Oh,
phone,
right.
and he
Wow.
used it for the presentation, like doing some crazy stuff in his style with the staircase
Wow.
as the
Brilliant.
model. So
Wow. On the second day, we had a podcast somewhere in the recording room, right at the top of that building, to be precise, in a tower.
yeah,
And you had to go to the floor number 7 or something like that, and then to this tower. It was a very cryptic place to search for, and I heard that our host, Captain Disillusion, Alan Milikjanyan, he tried to open some hatch to go straight to the roof or something before discovering that room. It was funny.
yeah. Quite a nice impression for me. Like it was the first conference for me. I just heard the impressions from the previous ones from people who are like came simultaneously throughout the years. Like it seems like almost everyone who came to one of the conferences seems to come back because it's like it's addictive, so to speak. So talking about addictive stuff, one of your slogans is drink more coffee and we will change the world of computer graphics. So maybe let's talk about the future of CG and Blender inside this future. How do you think the CGI future will look like in,
The
let's
future,
say, 5 or
the future
10
is
years?
bright. The future is bright. Ironically, I don't drink coffee now. I drink tea. Don't
T here
blame me
too.
for that. When we meet with Aidy, I always try to hook him up with some coffee,
Yep.
to just when we're in Warrington
Yeah.
recently, we were trying to nail as many coffee places, as we can fit into our tight schedule in Liverpool, in Manchester, in Warrington, in the search of the best coffee. And I think Aidy was quite impressed with a few
Yeah.
espressos, even. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
yeah,
almost
you tried
never.
something else. It escaped me. What was it? But it was a very fruity, very light type of coffee, quite pleasant one, very juicy even. So yeah, that is my thing. I just try to infuse a little bit of that coffee vibe into our meetings and conversations. And yeah, what
Yeah.
what were we talking about? The future of Blender. The future of Blender
And
is
coffee.
and coffee. They're tightly linked. The future of Blender is in particular bright because I think it is because it follows one of those bigger trends in just how the world develops. The trend towards prosumerism. When you link like prosumer or consumer and producer, you receive this new figure, prosumer, as presented by futurologist Alvin Toffler in his book called Third Wave. So basically, a new type of social actor uh, that emerged not so long ago with the introduction of Kodak, first to democratize the process of photography, and then so many different things, even pregnancy tests, where you can do things on your own without the help of the institution and so on. And then we got YouTube. Then we got like this luxury of broadcasting to the entire world from the comfort of your pajamas. And then we got computer graphics that is actually accessible. It is still hard, don't get me wrong. It still requires some budget. It still requires skill. But nowadays, you technically can create the, let's say, Hollywood quality, like using your computer, basically. And that is something that I think just fits very nicely into the paradigm of how we tend to do stuff with Aidy within the creative shrimp business. Basically, we try to close the gap between this highly evolved and sophisticated technology accessible to anyone, and basically the skill that is required to make use of this technology. That is the gap we are trying to help close.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask about this whole wave of new kind of how the software is evolving, like Blender included, and also all the stuff that kind of got introduced in the latest years, like the AI particularly, but also the real-time engines like Unreal Engine 5, everything. Like it still has kind of like a hard learning curve, but the trend is to make things as smooth as possible, like as close to the idea of the push the perfect render button, right? So making things for easier for people without much technical knowledge to do the art. It's still, I think it's still quite a long way to go to make it like really easy to use. But in some areas, like especially these AI
Yeah,
creations with
we
prompts,
see the first signs of that button that just makes it
yeah,
look
I think
good.
it got people like excited that you don't really have to know anything to create something stunning. Like how is your opinion on that? Or but I think that still there's a room for
Yeah, I think the concept of
for knowledge.
3D graphics as it um, is the same kind of thing. 3D graphics means like providing you with some automated solutions to make it possible to do things that it couldn't do otherwise, or to make it a much more smooth process. It's like, to draw the analogy of photography, where you can press the button and you just snap the picture without having to draw it. It doesn't mean that it will necessarily, the AI will replace the current technologies and stuff like that, but it shows the trend, it shows the direction. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. It is the same kind of thing to make it more accessible, ultimately, to just anyone, to be able to create images of any kind. It boils down to that general direction, to that general trend, I think. Yeah, I still have a lot of questions to AI, like how ethical it is, like to sample the, um, in particular, the style, for example, of a certain artist. But on the other hand, it is a quite new technology. We will see how it develops. Uh, Currently, it looks pretty stunning at times, but sometimes it looks absolutely like a trash, a total garbage. That kind of secondary, regurgitated type of look, very very generic, not super precise. You have to play with wording like quite a lot to be able to get something in particular rather than some generic mess. But it shows an enormous potential, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, the tools, as you say, there are it's still just different tools. You're still the idea, and bringing it back to lighting for a second. A lot of it is based on what you decide to leave out, and not necessarily what you decide to put in. So that is more true from a conceptual point of view. So, for example, take the film Jaws, for example. Leaving out a lot of the shark in the first half of it is obviously a decision which was albeit slightly forced on them due to mechanical and sort of physical issues that they were getting with it. But artistically, you can argue that was probably a strong choice. Now, that boils down to choice, and the big strokes, because you're still doing the text prompt, you still need to make those choices. As an artist, you need to, you're choosing how to describe it. But on
Exactly,
the
and
other
you have
hand,
to choose the output, right?
yeah,
So it also boils down to just having a good taste, and that is,
you're curator of your own ideas, basically.
exactly, that is the main thing about graphics, about art, is just having a taste. It won't help you to acquire this taste. You have to habit, I guess, to be able to
Yeah.
use the AI tools to the full potential and to develop the taste. You need to study the history of arts, just look at images, analyze it, do all the classical steps towards creating great images before you can use the AI tools even, you know? So it still requires the artist, it still requires the process of, as you said, just picking up the best or the more fitting or the more appropriate to your idea, picking those like options
Yeah.
from the thumbnails the Mid Journey generates. You still have to like
One,
guide
one
this
thing
process.
one thing that I see as kind of like a limitation or like a danger, or maybe not a danger, but like a tendency in this kind of AI tools is that they, because they are trained on a specific data set, uh, they tend to lean to specific, specific aesthetics, for example, that are more popular, or like there's more
Yeah, it is
data in that.
described by it all looks the same.
Exactly, and
People
that
people
there are
say
even like prompt trends, so to speak, like people typing in something art station trending or
art
some
station trending, right?
famous artist name, and they this kind of creates these bubbles of trending aesthetics which are kind
Mhm.
of evolving around the same visual ideas. And this is not really like super creative. And if you take a look at the history of arts, cinema or whatever, the really stunning artworks are the ones that really stood out because they were different, or sometimes not in the right way, so to speak, but some kind of author just had a strong vision that he wanted to realize. And
It's kind of like impressionism. So you have the advent of photography, but yet a lot of painters would have been thinking, "Oh, where's the artistry in that?" But what it does is unshackle the idea of painting to represent simply what is there in the scene. You can now interpret it, you can exaggerate, which you can do with photography as well. Of course, you can enhance certain qualities of the light to make it ultra real.
Yeah, there is a whole thing of hyper realistic paintings and hyper realism as an art movement. Yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
and
So
I'm thinking like
again,
in the music industry, there was like the big shock when the new technologies involving, like for example, the hip hop movement, like they were sampling the parts of music that they grew up on, and this was
yeah,
also kind of like similar case because they were kind of like building upon someone else's thing, just remixing it and using it in a creative way.
yeah.
But
I'm glad you brought that up actually, because that's similar in a sense to kind of trademark and copyright, and these kinds of ideas. Like things in our culture are so pervasive. Marvel, Disney, all these kinds of things, that you end up using those as building blocks for new things. But obviously, it's like, can we actually use that though? Because it's now no longer folklore; it's actually owned by some company. So it's not something which is easily passed along from human to human in a sort of traditional way anymore, potentially. And music is kind of similar as well. And from a culture point of view, it's when something gets devalued. So if you kind of feel, art can be just easily created with a prompt, the danger there is that you're kind of exposing a massive amount of the populace to kind of like uncurated art in the same way that you could kind of say, look at the top of the pops. What are the best 40 hits for this week? And I don't think any of us necessarily believe that is the best music in the world right now. You would probably look over the decades to kind of think, okay, well, what's stood the test of time and this kind of thing. And the other worry would be with music, like you said, with hip hop, or with like music which is only 3 chords and it sounds quite simple and easy to replicate, yet it really isn't. When we know that something is, it's just not, that tune seems to be more melodic than this other tune, or these, or it hits you on an emotional level which is hard to distinguish. But you kind of accept that this person is a better melody writer than that person on average, because again, human experience and context of who you are gets input to whatever it is that you experience. So I think that is something which I think is going to be a while before AI can particularly handle that. But at the same time, I think my fear on that is that the culture itself gets devalues. The appreciation of art is reduced because there's just so much kind of middle of the road stuff, and the diamonds are difficult to see. It's harder for that to sift to the surface.
Yeah, I think that's an unfortunate byproduct of having the technology available. The unfortunate byproduct of having this society of prosumers, like constantly churning out stuff online. That's like YouTube, you know,
I think this is
millions and millions of videos. Just
this is
mass
also like a
production.
generational experience. Like I've been watching like one YouTuber that's talking about a little bit about the music industry before like the 90s, where there was kind of like the last wave of rock and roll superstars, so to speak, and these were kind of like generational experiences. Like everyone listened to the same bands, and then it kind of when the internet got involved, it kind of got very very niche. Everyone kind of gets his own tribe. There's so many trends. There's
Yeah,
not like
because naturally it became easier to just to be able to communicate directly with your tribe,
exactly.
and to tap into these niche markets. It is called a long tail phenomenon, where you have like some really popular, like let's say bands, but also you have a long tail of less and less and less and less and less popular bands which still have their audiences, because nowadays they can be easily like connected to their audience via the means of internet, obviously. The same thing with pretty much anything. The same thing with Blender, which is quite a niche product still. I think even though it is a movement and so on and so forth, it is still in this niche of open source computer graphics, and you can see how productive it can be to work with that niche, to produce content for it, or to consume content for that matter. It's still
Yeah.
a very good thing, very easily accessible means of communication.
Yeah, the sort of draw of Blender in the first place is because it is so open. So you can create a tutorial knowing, well, anybody's got access to this stuff. And it's kind of like the fascination in a way, the story behind it. You know, like on these talent shows, the ones that tend to do well are the ones where it's like they have a backstory of, oh, I did this thing. And then I lost this person who was really dear to me, and now I'm going to be thinking of them when I sing tonight, and kind of creating a narrative. I think that's the narrative there, really, with the tutorials. Really, is that it's something that everybody can participate in. There is really no roadblock, that which is just in itself just always worth celebrating, and it's motivating and inspiring to continue to navigate one's days based around delivering more stuff in that scene. Aside from, as we were talking, as Gleb mentioned earlier, is also being attracted to things like games and other stories and films, and wanting to help participate in sculpting a mood and crafting an emotional experience for somebody to help kind of maybe it's kind of like the creating environment art, for example, is a massive buzz as an artist, because you're creating, let's say you're creating for a game and you create the environment art. It's kind of like that person is completely immersed within something you've had a hand in. It just kind of, it's that validation and kind of eternal sense of connection, and it just taps into these kind of deep needs as people, really. But as obviously as everybody is probably relates to these sorts of urges in different ways, and expresses them in different ways. But Blender is that thing which allows so many people to not necessarily worry about having a super expensive computer or a super expensive piece of software, which it really was when we were starting. It was basically wasn't anything else to be able to do this with. And
I think that's
kind of the new
the
rock and
best
roll
thing that
is the
happens to
games.
computer graphics, Blender.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
By,
it's
by
used
far.
it's used in so many areas, like not just straightforward computer graphics. It's like when you see in the conference there are people using it to produce, I don't know, jewelry
Exactly.
or
All kinds of
different crazy
diverse
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah.
backgrounds. You see architectural visualization. You see scientific visualization. You see paleontologists using Blender
Mm.
Yeah,
for whatever. You see music industry. You see
yeah,
Hollywood. You see all
and
kinds of things. Game
games.
development,
You
obviously.
mentioned
You
games a
know,
few times, and I know it's kind of
Tom
dear to your
Murphy
heart.
making game with Blender.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about this because like there was like a latest post by Andrew Price, the Blender guru, and he did a poll asking about bringing back the Blender game engine, and people voted yes or no or something else. And what's your view on that? Is it a good idea? Is it bad that Blender focused on one thing and dropped the ball on game engines?
Yeah, I think it was probably a good idea. That is my take on it. I think that was good uh, because obviously nowadays we have Godot, we have Unreal, which is almost free. Let's say at least like free if you're an enthusiast. It's super powerful. Unity, all that kind of stuff that you just need to compete with if you provide a game engine. And it would be strange if you just try to compete with these monsters, and at the same time you have to develop the 3D side of your software all at once. I think it got a little bit weird, and they just dropped it and dropped for good. I think that is my opinion on it.
In a thought experiment, though, if they had an extra £1 billion,
Should they do it?
Yeah.
Should they do it if they had an unlimited resources? It would still drag the software into slightly related, but not parallel directions. The one, the content creation, and the second one, the game engine, which is a totally different thing. Would it be productive? I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
thinking.
as a separate project, something like that, but not within this
Yeah.
3D content creation suite.
It's not a surprise that Epic, for example, has Unreal Engine, and they are rather providing links to other softwares like creation suites and not developing their own tools. I think Adobe did that with buying Substance, and now with the modular and stuff, they are trying to fill in that niche.
That being said, I love the Blender's interface when it comes to like conceptualizing the level design. So I would definitely love to use Blender for that kind of thing, if it like connected to some external engine, for placing the models on your level, for that kind of work. That would make sense. But then it got transferred to the render engine itself.
I loved the Blender
To
game
the game
engine.
engine, rather. Yeah.
It was amazing to have that within Blender, but I think Gleb's right. Really, there are other things out there now as well, but I am extremely excited about the interactive mode, because I think that it doesn't need to be doesn't need to be like massive amounts of tools for it to be really interesting. To just have little experiences that people can play. You can even with an interactive, the basic bare bones, you could probably create some interactive experience, which would be, again, in that realm of storytelling and that kind of thing. It's going to be fun. I bet people will probably treat it like a game engine, even just that simple bare bones interactive aspect of it. You'll still see it, I think. So we'll see.
Yeah, it could be the case.
Yeah, but for now it seems like that's Blender game engine won't be the case, but there's Godot and other options. But the Blender is developing a lot of other areas, and I wanted to ask
People
you
would
what.
probably feel as amiss if we didn't mention, say, the fact that the Blender game engine hasn't gone anywhere. It's still
Yeah,
being developed
and
by
as we
people.
mentioned, yeah, Tom Murphy is
Mhm.
creating
Yeah,
a game.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
open source, so
Although Tom
anyone
Murphy,
can pick it up.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, because you got the Up BGE, I believe, and there's another one. And they're all basically, it's still the Blender game engine. It's essentially just being, and you can use the most recent versions of Blender, I think, with some of them. But those intrigue me greatly as well, and I'd love to have more time to really know what I was talking about on that. But that was, yeah, they that is cool. But yeah, as you say, there are a lot of other projects out there at the moment.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, we talked about what Blender Foundation is not developing, so let's now talk about what it is developing and what is the most exciting feature that is being developed, and you cannot wait until it gets finished or
yeah, I think
released.
Eevee next would be one of these features for sure. More real-time rendering, the more the better. But at the same time, this is the conundrum. At the same time, I think that Cycles got already almost fast enough with a proper video card, almost fast enough for real-time rendering, for real-time ray tracing. And once real-time ray tracing becomes a thing, what would be the point of having the rasterization render engines like Eevee or the hybrid render engines that use some part of rasterization and ray tracing, when you could probably just path trace everything right away? Like, what would be the point of it? Because ray tracing is much more elegant, simple.
Yeah, but that, as you mentioned, it requires quite a heavy,
We can
gear.
already see like crazy optimizations if you watch 2 Minute Papers channel by Karol Jordan Fahir. He covers that extensively. All these optimizations that take render times from 2 days up to like a few seconds, few milliseconds. And if you just continue this trend, you will probably see very clearly that in a few years, ray tracing will be completely like, normally real time, 60 frames per second without any issues, especially with the sophisticated denoising algorithms kicking in, which use temporal denoising and other means of reducing the path traced noise. So that is the question that I don't really understand how to tackle. Like, why do you have to develop anything beyond ray tracing if ray tracing will eventually become real time and probably even very soon? What do you think?
That's probably a good question for a developer. For a developer that understands, the nitty gritty of how things work. Like
Yeah, at
I'm
the same
thinking
time,
like that.
we love Eevee. We love like real time approximations. It is very close to how actually game engines work, and it follows this kind of logic and this perspective on how the computer graphics should be delivered. So
You,
that
you
is
mentioned
very
you,
interesting.
you mentioned Cycles and how it developed to be really fast right now with the new Cycles X release and
Mhm.
all the improvements that are getting better and better. But some areas get introduced into Blender. Like I've watched your presentation on Blender Conference 2016, right, about lighting hacks, and you mentioned like a lot of nice cheats to achieve some effects in Blender
Mhm.
that you just have to be aware and build it up. But
Mhm.
following the logics of the perfect render button, some of these hacks get kind of introduced into or automated in the software. But still Cycles doesn't have a good caustics. Like it introduced some level of caustics, but it's still I've
Yes,
been even
yesterday,
seeing.
yesterday I experimented with Psychos extensively using caustics, trying to make it work, trying to render this classic sphere filled with water situation, slightly distorted surface,
Yeah, and I've
casting
seen
with
you've also dabbled with a LuxCore
doubled
render.
with Lux Render. So far, Lux Render wins, I think, naturally because it is a spectral render engine with a separate type of ray tracing just meant for caustics, for guiding caustics. But surprisingly, Cycles became also quite capable, at least for a simpler type of caustic animations.
All right, so let's maybe talk a little bit about the color in Blender, because I am probably every Blender user remembers the times a few years back of the filmic revolution, where a new color management
Exactly.
system in Blender got introduced, like the filmic transform, and right now there's something new coming from Troy Sobotka, which is called AGX. Right? Have you tried
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. We tested it. We even have a very small bonus section within the course comparing Filmic with AGX. It's not even section, just part of the one of the videos. Yeah, so far so good. AGX looks beautiful. I won't go into details, but basically it follows the same logic of just making sure that the output presented on your display isn't clipped, or when it is clipped beautifully with a beautiful roll off of the highlights, let's say. And so you get the most intense areas of your image desaturated beautifully, and that kind of stuff that makes it look like makes it look like film, basically, like a film emulsion like medium. That kind of logic. It has better handling, I mean AGX, of some parts of this spectrum, like the bluish colors, but I won't go into these details because Troy will probably enter the chat now and just correct me. um, but it ties in with the broader definition of color, the color management system in Blender. What is color at all? Like, where is it? Is it like a psychic phenomenon or a physical phenomenon, or something in between? Because if you have a look at all the illusions related with colors, uh, where you see, let's say, a red strawberry, and there is not a single red pixel in the image, all pixels are green and gray, and you see the red strawberry, and it makes you question what color is. And this rabbit hole runs really deep beyond the displays, beyond the let's say RGB primaries of cycles, beyond all that stuff, into the territories that are completely mad and completely unknown to pretty much everyone.
Apart from the mantis shrimp, perhaps.
Apart from mantis shrimp that has 12 cones, like this, going through much more discrete, much more like gradual perception of color and light. Who knows?
All right. So talking about the color right now, at least in my part of the world is getting white or whiter because of the snow, and Christmas is coming. So I wanted to ask you guys, what would be like the perfect gift, CG related or not CG related, for under your Christmas tree?
That's a good one.
That's tricky.
Speedier ray tracing. What else could it be? I don't know. Uh, a peace in Ukraine, perhaps. I would
Yeah.
go. Because, yeah, our colleagues, our friends are now in Ukraine, so that would be amazing. Um, if the war ended and they have won. So yeah, that would be my best gift, I think. And the free Belarus as well, please, if possible. Can I have two?
Yeah. I think we can go wild with these wishes, you know.
And and some coffee.
And some coffee.
Yeah, some good blend to put
Yeah.
into blender. Okay, so it was a super great conversation, very creative, I think. So right now I'm much more educated in the topic of shrimps. I feel elevated in that area, and it was super fun to talk with you. An honor to have you guys.
Thanks so much for having us. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's super fun
It was
talking
a
to you
good
too.
talk.
Mhm.
Great. So I hope a lot of people, a lot more than already enrolled in your lighting course, get to the Creative Shrimp family, and we'll probably meet online, and then maybe in the next Blender conference or whatever the future brings. Let's hope also Gleb's wishes come true.
Now the points of day to make it beautiful. And what else? Like now we out of beta, we releasing on time. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the entire Blender community for still sticking with us and for keeping us afloat. I think it is amazing that we are all together in this, and let's keep it this way. Let's keep like helping each other. I think that could be a nice wrap.
That's amazing. That's really cozy with this guitar ending. It's that kind of things only happen, you know, in the creative community spontaneously. So Gleb Alexandrov live here for you at CG Talks. See you around.
See you. See you. Thank you.
Take it easy.
Take it easy.
At garagefarm.net, you'll find many 3D rendering solutions. Use coupon codes visible on your social media channels during registration to boost your account up to $100 of free render credits and check how quick and life-saving 3D cloud rendering is.